As the underpinnings of some democratic countries are being called into question, China is holding out its model as a thriving alternative. Over the past 4 decades, Beijing has increasingly asserted its power on the global stage and is now on course to become the world's biggest economy 2 years sooner than predicted pre-pandemic. For China, this success legitimizes its model as an alternative to the liberal values of the West.
The world is undergoing changes unseen in a century, and now is the time for major development and major transformation.
But for the US and its allies, this authoritarian blueprint is seen as a threat to their democratic ideals.
Democracy doesn't happen by accident. We have to defend it, fight for it, strengthen it, renew it. We have to prove that our model isn't a relic of history.
And the global pandemic and its aftershocks have only heightened tensions between these competing systems.
When historians come back to look at the issue of COVID and geopolitics, they will ask, was 2020-21, were those pivotal years? Was that the year when suddenly Asian countries, China in particular, really began to seem as if they were back on top?
So what does it mean for the world as two superpowers go head-to-head, not just over trade or borders, but ideology?
Three hours, 4 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Right on time as far as the astronaut countdown.
In the 1960s, while the US was putting a man on the moon, China was struggling to feed its 1 billion people during the decade-long Cultural Revolution. After the death of Mao Zedong in 1976, it was the reforms of Deng Xiaoping that led China to prioritize economic growth, even if it meant going against core communist ideology. The country opened up to private business and foreign investment. Dominant state-owned banks turned savings into financing for roads, rail links, and ports. And foreign firms were forced to set up alongside a local partner, encouraging the transfer of technology. As a result, the economy grew 90-fold over the next 4 decades. For many outside China, it was expected that as the country's economy became more capitalist, its politics would become more democratic.
Other countries in Asia, South Korea, for example, were dictatorships at one point. They opened up their economy. They became known as Asian tigers, and democracy sort of came with that. So many people thought the more China exports to the world, the more it'll open up politically and kind of follow the path that some of those other countries in Asia had taken. That wasn't the case, however. China maintained political control.
And this control was maintained by using a blueprint known as the China model, a blend of state-directed capitalism and political authoritarianism that consists of 4 key elements to keep the one-party state thriving: focusing on the economy, stoking national pride, keeping party discipline, and allowing no challengers who may be critical of the government.
All day, troops have patrolled the streets, firing indiscriminately to keep people off the streets.
Beijing also argues its model removes the short-term demands of an election cycle, creating the stability needed to plan and execute long-term strategies. But in the more than 7 decades that the CCP has been in power, experts do point to an evolution in the Chinese authoritarian system. At the turn of the 21st century, both the Chinese and US models appeared to be flourishing. But then the 2008 financial crisis hit.
Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old firm, filed for bankruptcy,
stoking a rivalry between the superpowers and their models of government. And now a new global crisis has thrown the China model back into the spotlight. And initially, it didn't look so good. The silencing of Dr. Li Wenliang, the whistleblower who tried to warn China's authorities about a deadly coronavirus outbreak, confirmed the opacity of Beijing's system. But that same China model also allowed the government to enforce the first large-scale lockdown in modern times and quickly summon mass social compliance that helped to contain the virus. Although doubt surrounds the accuracy of numbers reported by China, it was inevitable that comparisons would be drawn with its rival superpower.
In general, if you're in an autocracy, you're in a worse situation. Yes, okay, China did okay, but you wouldn't have wanted to be in Iran during this. You wouldn't have wanted to be in any of the stans. You wouldn't have wanted to be in North Korea. You wouldn't want to be in Russia. So on the whole, the countries that have done well, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, these are all democracies. The levels of difference are so colossal between the countries that did this well and the ones that did it badly, that the biggest answer in all this is whether you had governments that worked and knew what to do.
It was the notable absence of the US government under President Donald Trump to lead a response during the early stages of the pandemic and the subsequent catastrophic death toll in America that caused many to question the strength of its model, including Beijing. This assertiveness under Xi Jinping means doubling down on border disputes in the South China Seas and along the border with India, while also looking to consolidate power in Tibet and Hong Kong. As this ideological rivalry increases, it's spilling over into many aspects of the global economy. Technology is just one of an increasing number of flashpoints. As China accuses the US of stoking Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests, Washington condemns the mass detention of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The Biden administration is also taking action to protect its model, such as increased spending for manufacturing self-sufficiency and strengthening ties with Taiwan.
We are in the midst of a fundamental debate about the future and direction of our world. That autocracy is the best way forward, they argue. And those who understand that democracy is essential to meeting these challenges. And I believe that every ounce of my being, that democracy will and must prevail.
And with potential financial and demographic challenges looming, there may be other threats to the sustainability of the China model that could arise from within the country.
The China model is, you can grow the economy, while maintaining a one-party rule. Yet at the same time, there's real questions about how long you can continue this as your population gets wealthier, as it gets more educated, as it gets more integrated with the world and has ideas from other places and has demands for better livelihoods and more say.
I think the lessons, if you look back through history, are really clear. Plagues are things that either cause the downfalls of particular orders or cause a rethink. So when you have these momentary disasters, that's the moment when you do wake up. By any measure, you look at the democracies of this world, you look at Europe and America together, and they are stronger than China. If you have a West that begins to reform its governments, that begins to talk about the importance of freedom, that begins to talk to like-minded countries about values like democracy and so on, but also makes its government more efficient, then that is a much more competitive power than what China has faced thus far.